My dad said you'll end up homeless and pathetic. Then 20 years later I got a LinkedIn message from him asking if I'm hiring. Show us some love by subscribing today. And don't forget, tell us in the comments where you're listening from. We read every message. I remember the exact moment my father stopped being my father. It was a Tuesday in August, humid enough that the air conditioning in our Detroit townhouse couldn't keep up. I was 17, sitting at our scratch dining table with college acceptance letters spread out like playing cards. My hands were shaking as I held the full-ride scholarship offer from Michigan State. Mom had left us 3 years earlier and it had just been Dad and me since then. I thought he'd be proud. I was so incredibly wrong about that. A sociology degree? His voice cut through the room like glass. You think that's going to feed you, Helen? You think some liberal arts nonsense is going to put a roof over your head? I tried to explain about my plans, about social work, about wanting to help communities like ours. But Chris Jones wasn't interested in explanations. He slammed his beer bottle down hard enough that foam erupted from the top. You're making the biggest mistake of your pathetic life. I didn't work double shifts at the plant to raise a daughter who'd throw away a future for some bleeding heart garbage. The words kept coming, each one sharper than the last. He called me naive, stupid, ungrateful. Then he stood up, towering over me in that way that used to make me feel protected but now just made me feel small. Mark my words, girl, he said, jabbing his finger at my face. You'll end up homeless and pathetic, begging on some corner with that useless degree. Don't come crying to me when reality hits. That night I couldn't sleep. The house felt different, poisoned somehow by the venom in my father's words. I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to the ceiling when I was 9, back when Dad used to read me bedtime stories. Back when he called me his little genius. Around 2 in the morning, I heard him stumbling up the stairs, muttering to himself. My door crashed open without warning. The hallway light silhouetted him and I could smell the whiskey from across the room. You still awake plotting your failure? His words slurred together. Let me tell you something about your precious mother. He had big dreams too. Thought she was too good for this family. Now she's shacking up with some dentist in Ann Arbor, playing stepmother to his kids while she forgot about her own daughter. I'd wondered about Mom for 3 years, filling the silence with hopeful fantasies. This truth hit like a sledgehammer. That's what happens to women who think they're special, he continued, leaning against my doorframe. They abandon what matters. You're just like her, Helen. Selfish. Delusional. At least when you crash and burn, I won't be there to pick up the pieces. Something inside me cracked that night. Not broke, cracked. Like the first fracture in ice before it completely shatters. I made a decision in that moment, lying in the darkness while my father's breathing grew heavy with sleep against my doorframe. I would prove him wrong. Not for him. For me. I left on a Wednesday morning in late August while Dad was at work. My entire life fit into 2 duffel bags and a backpack. I'd withdrawn the $1,500 I'd saved from my part-time job at the library, closed my bank account he had access to, and arranged to stay with my best friend Tasha until the dorms opened. I left a note on the kitchen counter next to his coffee maker. Simple words, gone to college. Don't contact me. K. My hands shook as I locked the door for the last time. The Greyhound station downtown smelled like disinfectant and desperation. I bought my ticket to East Lansing and sat in the hard plastic chair watching families say goodbye. A little girl clung to her father's leg, crying that she'd miss him. He kissed her forehead, promised to call every day. My chest ached with something I couldn't name. At Michigan State, I threw myself into everything. Classes, work-study programs, volunteer positions. I barely slept. When other freshmen were partying, I was in the library or at my campus job. When they were sleeping in, I was attending office hours, building relationships with professors. My roommate, a girl named Nicole from Grand Rapids, asked once why I pushed so hard. Trying to prove something? She said it lightly, but it landed heavy. Yeah, I told her. I am. What I didn't tell her was that every time I wanted to quit, I heard Dad's voice, homeless and pathetic. It became fuel. Pure, burning fuel that powered me through exhaustion and doubt. By sophomore year, I'd landed an internship with the Detroit Community Outreach Center, working with homeless youth. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every kid I met, I saw pieces of myself. The anger, the abandonment, the desperate need to prove their worth to people who'd already decided they had none. There was this boy, Chris. Same name as my father. 16, been on the streets for 8 months after his mom's boyfriend kicked him out. He had that same hard edge, that protective shell. Why do you even care? He asked me one day, arms crossed, eyes challenging. Because someone should have cared about me, I said without thinking. The walls came down a little after that. I helped Chris get into a transitional housing program, connected him with educational resources, watched him start to believe in himself again. My supervisor, a woman named Patricia Montgomery who'd worked in social services for 30 years, pulled me aside after a particularly difficult case. You've got something special, Helen. You don't just see these kids as problems to solve. You see them as people. That's rare. She recommended me for a scholarship program for graduate school. Full funding, stipend included at the University of Michigan's School of Social Work. The same university in Ann Arbor where my mother had apparently rebuilt her life. I almost didn't apply because of that connection. But then I thought, why should I limit my future because of her choices? I got in. Full ride plus a research assistant position that paid enough to cover rent. I called Tasha first. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I didn't call my father. Didn't even cross my mind. Graduate school was brutal in the best way. I was learning theory, policy, practice, how to actually change systems, not just help individuals survive them. During my second semester, I was assigned to do field research at a women's shelter in Ann Arbor. That's where I met Janet. Janet Richardson. She was the shelter director, this force of nature in her early 50s with silver-streaked locks and the warmest smile I'd ever seen. We clicked immediately. She offered mentorship that went beyond professional guidance. Coffee meetings turned into dinner invitations. She asked about my life, actually listened to the answers. One evening, about 6 months into our friendship, Janet invited me to her home for dinner. There's someone I want you to meet, she said mysteriously. Her house was beautiful, a restored Victorian with a wraparound porch. Inside it smelled like rosemary and fresh bread. And standing in the kitchen setting the table was a woman I hadn't seen in 6 years. My mother, Deborah Jones. Though apparently she went by Deborah Richardson now. The wooden spoon I was holding clattered to the floor. Mom's face went pale then red. Janet looked between us, confusion turning to horror. Oh God, Janet whispered. Helen, I didn't know. Deborah, you said your daughter's name was Kiki and she was in California. I lied, Mom said quietly. About a lot of things. The room spun. My mentor, the woman who'd been filling the mother-shaped hole in my life, was married to my actual mother. The woman who'd abandoned me. The universe had a sick sense of humor. Janet's wife. My mother. The three of us stood in that kitchen and I felt 17 again, small and unwanted. I should have left. Should have walked out and never looked back. But Janet's face, the betrayal and confusion there, kept me rooted. Sit, Janet said, her voice shaking. We're going to talk about this. Now. We moved to the living room like soldiers heading to battle. Mom perched on the edge of the couch. I took the chair farthest away. Janet sat between us, literally and figuratively. Start talking, Deborah, Janet said. And I mean the truth this time. Mom's hands twisted together. Helen was 14 when I left. Her father, Chris, he'd become someone I didn't recognize. The drinking got worse. He was verbally abusive, controlling. I was drowning. So you just left me there? The words ripped out of me. You saved yourself and left me with him? I tried to take you. I begged you to come with me that night, but you chose him. You said I was breaking up the family, that you hated me. You were 14 and angry, and I thought... She stopped, tears streaming. I thought he'd be better without me there. That removing myself from the equation would help. I called Helen. Every week for months. He said you didn't want to talk to me. Memory stirred, murky and uncertain. Had there been phone calls Dad intercepted? Messages he never passed along? I wrote letters, Mom continued. Sent them to your school. Did you ever get them? I shook my head numb. By the time I hired a lawyer, Chris had convinced you I'd abandoned you. The lawyer said forcing custody would traumatize you more. I was a coward. I chose to believe that. I moved on. Janet stood abruptly. You told me your daughter wanted nothing to do with you. That she was thriving in California with her father. Wait here, Janet said, her voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. She disappeared upstairs. Mom and I sat in excruciating silence. I studied her face, looking for the mother I remembered. She'd aged, obviously. Fine lines around her eyes. Silver threaded through her hair. But there was something else. A softness she never had before. Or maybe I was just too young to see it then. Janet returned with a shoebox. He thrust it at Mom. Show her. Mom opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of unopened envelopes. Letters addressed to Deborah Richardson at various addresses, all marked return to sender. My handwriting. I wrote you, I whispered. All through high school. Dad said he didn't have your address, but I found old phone bills with an Ann Arbor number. I looked up the address online, sent letters for 3 years. Mom pulled one out, dated from my senior year. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't open it. I took it from her, unfolded the paper I'd touched 5 years ago. The teenage desperation bled through every word. Mom, Dad says college is stupid. He's drinking more. I'm scared to be here, but I don't know where to go. Please, if you ever loved me, send some sign that I'm not as worthless as he says. I got a scholarship. Full ride. Maybe you could be proud of me even if he's not. Please write back. Please. Helen, I never got these, Mom sobbed. Helen, I swear I never got them. Janet was looking at the envelopes closely. These are all addressed to your old apartment, Deborah. The one you had when we first met. But look, she held one up to the light. They've been opened and resealed. Greg, Mom said suddenly. Her face went white. It had to be Greg. Your ex-husband? Janet's voice was dangerously quiet. Why would he intercept mail addressed to you? Mom stood pacing. When I left Chris, I stayed with my sister in Lansing first. But Chris kept showing up, drunk and angry. I got a restraining order, moved to Ann Arbor. I was dating someone briefly, Greg Hutchins. It was a disaster. He was controlling, jealous. When I broke it off, he made threats. The pieces were clicking together in my mind. What kind of threats? He said he'd make sure I ended up alone. That he'd destroy any chance I had at happiness. I thought he was just being dramatic. I never imagined. She looked at the box of returned letters. He had my apartment key. I changed the locks after we broke up, but he could have been collecting mail before that. And after I moved in with Janet, I never thought to check if anything was being forwarded incorrectly. So this man, I said slowly, intercepted letters from a teenage girl to her mother out of revenge against you? I'm going to the police, Janet said. This is mail fraud at minimum. Emotional abuse. Deliberate interference. Wait. I held up my hand. Something else was bothering me. Mom, you said you called. Dad said I refused to talk. But what about later? I've had the same cell number since I was 16. You couldn't call me directly. Mom's face crumbled. Chris changed your number. He sent me a text from a new number saying you'd gotten a new phone and didn't want me to have it. I saved that number. I texted it for years, Helen. Birthday wishes. Holiday messages. I thought you were just ignoring me. Janet pulled out her phone. What's the number you've been texting? Mom recited it. Janet dialed, put it on speaker. A man's voice answered. Yeah. Who is this? Janet demanded. Who's asking? The line went dead. That's not my number, I said. That's not even close to my number. The scope of the deception was staggering. My father hadn't just failed to pass along messages. He'd actively constructed an elaborate lie. He'd intercepted letters, rerouted calls, even created a fake number to convince my mother I wanted nothing to do with her. Why? I asked the room. Why would he go to such lengths? Control, Janet said. She'd dealt with enough abuse cases to recognize the pattern. He couldn't control your mother anymore, so he controlled the narrative. He made sure you hated her and she thought you hated her. Kept you both isolated. Mom crossed to me, fell to her knees in front of my chair. Helen, I am so sorry. I should have fought harder. I should have shown up at your school, demanded to see you, hired a better lawyer. I failed you. But please believe me, I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day. I looked into her eyes and saw the truth there. Saw the years of guilt and grief. Saw a woman who'd been lied to just as much as I had. Something loosened in my chest. Not forgiveness yet, that would take time. But the beginning of understanding. I need space, I told her. This is too much. But, I swallowed hard. Maybe we could start with coffee. Just talk. Anything, Mom whispered. Anything you need. I left that house feeling like I'd been turned inside out. Coffee became lunch. Lunch became dinner. Over 6 months, my mother and I carefully reconstructed a relationship from the ruins of the old one. It wasn't easy. We had screaming fights about the past, about choices made and not made. But we kept showing up. I finished my master's degree with honors and got hired by a nonprofit focused on family reunification services. The irony was profound, but it felt right. I was helping rebuild what people like my father tried to tear apart. Janet became a mother figure too, different from Deborah but equally important. She taught me about setting boundaries, about healing without becoming hard. Meanwhile, I heard nothing from Chris Jones. Not a word in 4 years since I'd left. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was still that 17-year-old girl waiting for him to say he was proud. I got a job offer from a startup called Rebridge Solutions. They were developing a tech platform to connect social services across municipalities, making it easier for people to access help. They wanted someone with both field experience and passion. The salary was staggering, 3 times what I was making at the nonprofit. I'd be the director of community impact. At 25 years old, I accepted. Within a year, I'd helped Rebridge secure major contracts with cities across Michigan. My face appeared in Crane's Detroit Business magazine. The headline, 25 Under 25, Young Leaders Changing Communities. My father's words echoed mockingly in my mind, homeless and pathetic. I'd bought a condo in Royal Oak. Drove a decent car. Had a career I loved and a family I was rebuilding. Homeless and pathetic. The phrase became my private joke, my victory lap. It was a Tuesday morning when the LinkedIn message appeared. I was at my desk, reviewing proposals for our expansion into Ohio markets. My phone buzzed with a notification. Chris Jones wants to connect with you on LinkedIn. I stared at that name for a full minute. I hadn't blocked him. Why would I? He didn't know any of my social media handles, or so I thought. I clicked on his profile. The photo showed a man 20 years older than I remembered. Gray threaded hair, deeper lines, same hard eyes. His title, Seeking New Opportunities. Translation, Unemployed. His work history told a story. Laid off from the plant 4 years ago, spotty employment since then. His last job ended 8 months ago. Recent posts showed desperate networking attempts. Then I saw it. His message request came with a note. Helen, I saw your article in Cranes. Looks like you've done well for yourself. I always knew you had potential. Reby is doing interesting work. Are you involved in hiring? I have 30+ years of manufacturing experience, but I'm open to new fields. Would love to reconnect and discuss opportunities. Hope you're well. Dad, I read it 3 times, each time finding new levels of audacity. I always knew you had potential. The revisionist history was breathtaking. No mention of homeless and pathetic. No acknowledgement of the last 8 years of silence. Just a calculated reach out now that he needed something. My first instinct was rage. Pure white-hot fury. My second instinct was to laugh. The cosmic justice of it all was too perfect. My phone rang. Did you see it? She asked without preamble. Apparently, Dad had messaged her too through Facebook, asking if she knew how to reach me. He's got some nerve, Mom said. After everything. I sat with that message for 3 days. Didn't respond, didn't delete it. Just let it exist in my inbox like an unexploded bomb. My therapist, yes, I'd been in therapy since grad school, asked what I wanted to do. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to help him just to prove I'm the bigger person. Part of me wants to ignore him completely. And part of me wants to tell him exactly where he can shove his job request. What would each of those choices give you? Dr. Hargrove asked. I thought about it. Helping him would let me prove I'm nothing like him. Ignoring him would let me maintain my peace. But telling him off, I paused. That would let me finally say everything I've held back. There's no wrong answer here, Helen. Whatever you choose, make sure you're choosing it for yourself, not for him. I decided on option 4, one I hadn't initially considered. I would respond, but on my terms. I opened LinkedIn and typed, Chris, thank you for reaching out. I did see your message. You're right, I have done well. After you told me I'd end up homeless and pathetic with my sociology degree, I was motivated to prove you wrong. Mission accomplished. Regarding employment at Reby, we do have positions open. However, all candidates must demonstrate our core values of empathy, community investment, and family support. Given that you taught me what the absence of those values looks like, I'm not confident you'd be the right cultural fit. I wish you the best in your job search. I hope you find someone willing to give you the kind of grace and support you refuse to give your own daughter. For what it's worth, I'm happy now. I have a family who actually shows up for me. That's worth more than any job I could offer you. Helen Richardson, yes, Richardson. I'd legally changed my name 6 months ago. One more way of choosing who I wanted to be. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came within an hour. Helen, I don't know what your mother told you, but she's filling your head with lies. I did my best raising you alone after she abandoned us. Maybe I wasn't perfect, but I kept a roof over your head. You're being cruel and ungrateful. This is exactly why I knew that liberal education would ruin you. You've become the kind of person who kicks someone when they're down. I needed help and you threw it in my face. Don't bother reaching out when you finally grow up and realize what you've lost. I read it twice, then blocked him on every platform I could think of. No anger this time. Just clarity. He hadn't changed. Would never change. He was still rewriting history, still playing the victim, still blaming everyone else for his choices. But here's what he didn't understand. I hadn't lost anything. I'd gained everything. That evening I had dinner with Mom and Janet at their place. We cooked together, laughed together, planned a vacation together. Real family. Chosen family. I'm proud of you, Mom said as we cleared dishes. For setting that boundary. For protecting yourself. I learned from the best, I told Janet, squeezing her hand. My phone buzzed. Tasha, girl, did Chris Jones really try to get you to hire him? Nicole just told me. That man has audacity. I laughed, typed back. Had. Past tense. He's blocked now. 3 months later I got promoted to vice president. At 26. ReBridge was expanding nationally and I'd be overseeing community impact across 12 states. The press release went out with my photo and story, including the part about being told I'd end up homeless and pathetic. My phone exploded with messages from people sharing their own stories of proving doubters wrong. The article went viral. Homeless and pathetic. I thought about those words one last time, then let them go. They weren't prophecy. They weren't even relevant. They were just the bitter words of a small man who couldn't imagine that someone might become great despite him. Or maybe because of him. Called Mom. Want to come to the press conference tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it for the world, baby. And she didn't. She sat front row with Janet, beaming like I'd won an Olympic medal. In the audience, surrounded by colleagues and real family, I realized something. The best revenge isn't success. It's healing. It's building a life so full of love and purpose that the people who tried to break you become irrelevant. Chris Jones wanted to be part of my story. But he'd only ever been the prologue. The obstacle I overcame on my way to becoming myself. The rest? That was all me.